Hello, welcome once again to 177 Nations of Tasmania podcast. I'm Mark Thompson. So what do you know about Nigeria? For many Australians, their only contact with Nigeria may be through emails from a Nigerian prince wanting to mysteriously place millions of dollars into their bank account. But did you know that Nigeria is not only Africa's most populous country, but it is also both one of the largest Christian and Muslim nations. It's also the home to Nollywood, which is the third largest producer of films in the world and the home for African filmmaking. The Nigerian population of Tasmania has been steadily increasing and predominantly consists of well-paid professionals as well as students. And to tell me more about this, I have Edward, who lives in Launceston and has been working here for a number of years.
The first thing I would say that brought me to Launceston was that need to leave my country. That's the first thing. And then it could have been anywhere. So it wasn't like we fished out Launceston. It could have been anywhere as long as it was a good, safe place to be. So my wife landed a scholarship in Utah for maritime law. She's a PhD maritime law. And I was like, you know what, we're going. We left Nigeria and arrived Launceston directly. Yeah.
So how long ago was that?
This was in 2018, first quarter of 2018.
Why did you decide you needed to leave Nigeria? What was the motivation?
First of all, growing up, I had a lot of exposure to literature. I think that's where the travel bug started. And I just knew the world was accessible and interesting, and I didn't have to spend my whole life in one place. So I had, lived in a few other countries like Budapest, Hungary, and Houston, Texas in the US, and Padova in Italy, and then.
Sorry, were you living there or working there, or
living, working, schooling, one thing or the other?
Yeah.
But I've always had reason to go somewhere else. So when I came back to Nigeria, I was like, you know what, I can do with another trip with my family for a bit. Yeah. So that's the main thing. Yeah. Of course, there are other tiny bits here and there, but that's the main reason. I love traveling, and I love being in other cultures. I came here, I didn't have any job, and my wife was studying, and I started applying for jobs and started networking, attending footy games, attending clubs, joined the Red Cross and stuff like that, and my CV started flying around, and I got called for an interview and got a job. Yeah.
So I might ask you a bit more about the networking, because that's often a pretty important area for new people.
It is really important for new people,
and I know a lot of new people can struggle with it. A little bit. So what were some of the main things you found useful for networking here and getting to know local people better?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, one of the key things colonization did for us was to give us that Western style British culture, which comes to bear when you come to a country like this. So as soon as I watched the landscape of Tasmania and Launceston, I was like, oh, okay, this is the way. Because it's something, like I said, there's no difference between Launceston and the average small city in Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a strong sense of custodianship, they have a strong sense of community, and they are very warm to people they accept and very cold to people they don't know. And things like that. It's the same in every small, town or community that you go to, especially with the Western style orientation. So immediately I knew it had to be networking, and I went to work and I started networking, and I found the community to be very welcoming, and the more they know you, the more they love you, the more they embrace you, like they should. Like, how else is it gonna
Yeah,
happen? They need
yeah,
to know you more. They need to get to see you around more. You just don't pop out from nowhere. And
yeah,
so I think if I were to summarize my network journey, it would be, first of all, I'm coming from a British style country. That gave me, the framework. So people coming from other types of orientation will find it way harder
yeah,
to start. So for me, I didn't come to Launceston and I didn't feel like a fish out of water. Like, I understood what was going on.
yeah, right.
Yeah, so that was a good start for me. I understood that if you met someone, let's say fishing, that could materialize into something serious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but so I was careful to make a good impression wherever I went and make connections, and yeah. Nigeria, as we know, was colonized by the British, and the British really did a number on us. About 200 years of occupation, and both directly and indirectly, because they had their ways of doing it either through churches or through businesses, before they officially put a governor general there. So for a long period, they'd been influencing Nigerian culture. So by the time I was born, in the 80s, and Nigeria was basically a European style country. Yeah, so I was born in a city named Port Harcourt, named after a British captain. I went to Air Force Primary School, and and I spoke English all my life.
Okay.
Yeah, like, I was, from the first day I stepped foot in school, it was English. Life in Nigeria for someone like me, born into a middle class family with educated parents and into a city, it's no different than, someone who was born in the US or in the UK or,
Okay.
yeah, in Singapore or anything, So there's nothing radically different other than the fact that because of crude oil, I grew up in a very diverse city. By the time I was 10, I had met people from over 20 nationalities.
Yeah, right.
Irish, Americans, I go to church and I meet people from India, Pakistan, because the oil companies were bringing expatriates, like, in a rapid way. Like, you just see them coming and going in the supermarkets, everywhere. They were just everywhere, expatriates, So by the time I was in secondary school, I was fully exposed to, all the cultures in the world. So that was what it was like.
So was that part of what made you curious about the rest of wanting to see other parts of the world?
Yeah, that was a secondary influence. The primary influence was my mom is a librarian.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's a professor of information science. So I was drenched in books,
Yeah.
like, just growing. And my mom is a very liberal person. Like, she had no restrictions on what a person could read. Like,
Okay.
by the time I was 10, I was reading things like Lobster and Rampa and mystical books. She didn't care. She was like, read, and gave me, and I read and read and read. And, I just knew the world was out there. Go see it.
Yeah, right.
Go see this stuff.
Yeah, right. Because I was going to ask you, because I know a few of the stereotypes of Nigerian families and Nigerian mums from, watching some things on TV.
Yeah.
I know that the general stereotype is that the mothers in Nigeria are very strict and rule the family with a iron rod. I guess. But it sounds like, was it like that for you, or it sounds like it might have been a bit different?
So my grandmother was a matriarch and fits that description. But because Nigeria has 350 plus ethnicities in it, it is difficult and both my parents were from two different ethnicities.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had to meet halfway with regards to culture. And, British culture created that space for them. So since both of them were British educated, they operated in that British cultural space.
Okay.
So instead of leaning on one culture or the other, which were at variance with each other, because all 350 plus cultures had very little to do with each other.
All right.
They were just lumped together by the British, you know. So my mom, is from an island nation off the Atlantic where they are matrilineal somewhat.
Okay.
Yeah, and so women hold a better status in society and in families, while my dad is from the Igbo speaking region, eastern region of Nigeria, mostly farmers and agrarian people who have a strong patriarchal way of life.
Yeah.
So that was something I think they had to both put aside and
Yeah.
just go with the British, or like the Western way of doing things.
Yep.
Yeah. So I grew up in a household where I didn't know where it took me a while to even pick up my own language.
All right.
Yeah.
So do you mean does that mean your parents spoke English? At
Yeah,
home
they
as
spoke
well?
English to each other
Okay.
and to me. So we spoke English at home and everywhere until I think when I was in my teens.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, my mom just decided we should learn this language. We all know it. You guys don't know it. You guys should learn it.
Right.
And it was easy for me to pick it up because I've been hearing it all my life. I just
Yep.
never spoke it. So immediately I started speaking it. It just,
Yeah.
went easy.
So I guess you heard it in the street. And
Yeah,
things
it's
like that?
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
But the language at school was English.
Yeah. English was the language at school, the language in church, the language in the marketplace, the news, everywhere is English.
I mean, I guess it's probably an advantage now that you're wanting to, in terms of traveling.
Yeah, it's a great advantage for traveling, and it's also because English always comes with its culture.
Yeah.
So it's also a great advantage for dealing with culture shock. So wherever I show up, the English, the British Empire has had massive influence in the world. So wherever you show up, the bit of British Western culture that you have always insulates you against any shock you're gonna meet. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Australia would have, even more so in Tasmania, would have no idea what it's like.
What's it like? Yeah.
In Nigeria or Africa generally.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's a lot of stereotypes about Nigeria as well.
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell me a bit about what was the kind of place like where you grew up?
Nigeria, as we know, was colonized by the British, and the British really did a number on us. About 200 years of occupation, and both directly and indirectly, because they had their ways of doing it either through churches or through businesses before they officially put a governor general there. So for a long period, they'd been influencing Nigerian culture. So by the time I was born, in the 80s, and Nigeria was basically a European style country. Yeah, so I was born in a city named Port Harcourt, named after a British captain. I went to Air Force Primary School, and and I spoke English all my life.
Okay.
Yeah, like I was from the first day I stepped foot in school, it was English. Life in Nigeria for someone like me born into a middle class family with educated parents and into a city, it's no different than, someone who was born in the US or in the UK or in Singapore or anything, So there's nothing radically different other than the fact that because of crude oil, I grew up in a very diverse city. By the time I was 10, I had met people from over 20 nationalities.
Yeah, right.
Irish, Americans, I go to church and I meet people from India, Pakistan, because the oil companies were bringing expatriates in a rapid way. Like you just see them coming and going in the supermarkets, everywhere. They were just everywhere, expatriates, So by the time I was in secondary school, I was fully exposed to, all the cultures in the world. So that was what it was like.
So was that part of what made you curious about the rest of wanting to see other parts of the
Yeah,
world?
that was a secondary influence. The primary influence was my mom is a librarian.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's a professor of information science. So I was drenched in books,
Yeah.
like just growing. And my mom is a very liberal person. Like she had no restrictions on what a person could read. Like
Okay.
by the time I was 10, I was reading things like Lobster and Rampa and mystical books. She didn't care. She was like, read, and gave me, and I read and read and read. And, I just knew the world was out there. Go see it.
Yeah, right.
Go see this stuff.
Yeah, right. Because I was going to ask you, because I know a few of the stereotypes of Nigerian families and Nigerian mums from, watching some things on TV.
Yeah.
I know that the general stereotype is that the mothers in Nigeria are very strict and rule the family with a iron rod. I guess. But it sounds like, was it like that for you, or it sounds like it might have been a bit different?
So my grandmother was a matriarch and fits that description. But because Nigeria has 350 plus ethnicities in it, it is difficult and both my parents were from two different ethnicities.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had to meet halfway with regards to culture. And, British culture created that space for them. So since both of them were British educated, they operated in that British cultural space.
Okay.
So instead of leaning on one culture or the other, which were at variance with each other, because all 350 plus cultures had very little to do with each other.
All right.
They were just lumped together by the British, So my mom, is from an island nation off the Atlantic where they are matrilineal somewhat.
Okay.
Yeah. So what they did was just to transfer the whole dynamic of their interactions with a dibia and just superimpose it on the clergyman. That's it. So that's how they were able to adapt. That's for the serious Christians one. Then there are the nominal ones, which are like a majority, who just show up for show and still have their stuff going on behind closed doors. Yeah. On the other hand, the northern part of the country really bought Islam wholesale from the Arabs, because there was an Arabic type colonization of northern Nigeria, which happened with a jihad by Usman Dan Fodio. And it was a really, really successful jihad, because he covered almost half the country, planted emirates everywhere. So it's in their own situation. It was a wholesale, we are now Muslim type thing, so there's no ambivalence around it or equivocation or anything. They're very well invested in it.
So when did that happen, actually?
Oh, it happened, I think, in the 1800s, 1800s, just before the trans-Saharan slave trade. There was a trans-Saharan slave trade before the transatlantic slave trade, or about the same time. The government has done a really great job of managing, Christianity and Islam in the country. They've done a fantastic job. However, once in a while, because both religions believe in proliferation, there's always, tough wars, clashes here and there. Oh, you can't come plant a church here, or oh, why should you build a mosque here? Like every other place I've been in. Like, I remember in Italy, it was a big issue when the mayor of Padova wanted to give a piece of land to Muslims to build a mosque. It was a huge deal, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, but are there people who still practice traditional religion?
Yeah. Like I said, there are a lot of open practitioners and there are a lot of hidden practitioners, but the courts recognize traditional
Okay.
culture and religion. And if you swear an oath by a deity, it stands in court. It's called customary court. So, because of multiplicity of ethnicities, what a priest is from differs from culture to culture.
Yep.
Yeah, but yes, they've got status in their communities. Some of them are hereditary, and others are just divine anointed type
Okay.
situation. Like I know a man who used to be a lecturer in a university, and came back home one day and said he wanted to be a dibia. The spirit spoke to him. Stuff like that happens. Otherwise, it's usually passed from father to son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's easier way.
So we have a saying where I come from that a rich man has all types of people in his house. And my understanding of stereotypes is that people are drawn to other people who are like them. So I've been around a lot of countries and a lot of people, and I've heard all sorts of stereotypes. And I realized that people gravitate towards stuff that resonates with them. So, for example, one time I was in Romania and someone walked up to me and said, "You're Nigerian," and I'm like, "Yeah," and he said, "Do you know Nike?" I say, "Why should I know Nike?" He's like, "She's one of the greatest artists in the world, and she lectures in Harvard from Nigeria." I said, "I don't know her." He's like, "Okay, I'm an art enthusiast. That's why I know her." That told me all I needed to know about anyone who comes asking me about email scams. You're an email scammer. That's why you know such stuff. People who like authors, they know that we have Nobel Prize authors.
Yep.
People who like politics know that Nigeria has been in every political field you can, from the World Trade Organization to the UN to people who like football know that Nigeria has been all over soccer.
Famous actors.
Yes. People who like acting, people who like, I met a British soldier, a retired soldier, who was telling me about the amazing Nigerians he met at Sandhurst every time he was, So it just up to the individual, So stereotypes are more about the person propagating them than what is real.
Yeah.
And that's what I've realized. And here in Australia, I found people who came up to me and asked me stuff about, political activists that I don't even know of. And they educate me about my country. Like, you have really serious political activists in your country that are doing really great work. And I'm like, okay. So Nigeria must be really politically charged. I'm like, I guess so. So that's my take on stereotypes. It's about the individual.
What's sort of some of the more, I guess, unusual or strange questions you might have been asked about Nigeria?
Well, first of all, I don't consider any question strange. I like all questions, and I like human interaction at every level. So, and I prefer people who want to learn, even if they misstep in their quest for learning. I prefer them to people who judge from afar. So I've had weird interactions. But I think the worst of all, the weird ones, it's someone who came up to me and was asking me how did he put it? He said, "I hope you're not one of the Nigerians who bring drugs to other countries."
All right.
Yeah, straight to my face.
Was he Australian?
Of course he was Australian. I'm talking about Australia here.
Yeah.
Oh, if we want to talk about other countries, I've had some crazy interactions in Italy, but the Italian people have the way they interacted with me was they had more of a classist problem,
Right.
than they had of ignorance. So they were not really ignorant about stuff. They were just adamant that a black person was beneath them. That's all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's all that's all their problem was. But with regards to ignorance and weird questions, then someone coming up to me and asking me, I hope I'm not one of the Nigerians. And I was like, I'm surprised you know about such people.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you know about such people? Are you into drug stuff? And he just walked away. That type of interaction has happened, but it's been mostly good. I met an Australian who had worked in Ghana and Nigeria, and he actually challenged me to a jollof rice cooking contest, which is like the highest level of challenges you can do to a Nigerian. Like, yeah.
Can you explain a bit more about what that is?
So in West Africa, there's a dish called jollof rice.
Mm-hmm.
It's made from tomato sauce and rice, and it's like the pride and joy of every West African country. The Australian, New Zealand stuff with one of their cakes, is it the pavlova?
Pavlova.
Yeah, that type of thing. So in West Africa, it's the jollof rice, and who started it, who's the best at it, and stuff like that. So it's always if you Google it, it's all over the internet. Like, people.
Yeah, I'll check it out later.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've met Australians who knew the culture to that point.
Right.
As to challenge me to jollof rice, and I laughed all day. Like, yeah. So that's I've met Australians who knew more about Nigeria than me.
But when you were at school, did you have some kind of aspiration or ambition about what you wanted to do with your life?
Oh, yeah. It was really hard, because I wanted to be an actor.
Okay.
I was really invested in it, and I was part of a lot of school plays, and I went for drama championships, and I won the Shield of the State and all that. I was really invested in it, but my parents were not enthused, like, they didn't see how I could make a living with it. And in Nigeria, and among a lot of African parents, education is a means to a meal ticket.
Yeah.
So if they don't see the pathway, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Although you've got Nollywood, don't you?
Nollywood is a recent bloom.
Yeah.
It didn't happen when in the 80s there were no Hollywood. In the 90s, no Hollywood, no Nollywood. In the 2000s, in fact, by the time I finished uni, I don't think a Nollywood actor had ever seen #1 million before. It's just recent. Nollywood is the third largest export of movies right now.
Yeah.
There's Hollywood, there's Bollywood, the Indian film industry, and straight into Nigeria and Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has blown up, really. And I wish I
You're
wish
there
I
at
was
the wrong
part
time.
of it. I wish I was part of it, but that's gone now. But that's what I wanted to, be. And somehow my parents were able to convince me that, you can study law and you can still go into acting later. Acting will always be there for you. It's not running away. You can always, and they started showing me people who started acting at 50, at 60, like stuff like that. And I went back to school.
Yeah, cunning parents. They knew the right psychology to
Yeah.
use, I guess. If you were to offer some advice to a Nigerian who's thinking of coming to Tasmania, what would be some key things that you think they would need to know first?
So it depends on where they're coming from. If they're coming straight from Nigeria or if they're coming from another part of Australia. If they're coming straight from Nigeria, my advice to them would be, find some other Nigerian first and get the orientation locked down and know what's going on. That way, you're able to know what to do faster instead of learning, reinventing the wheel. But if they're coming from Sydney and Melbourne and some other, which is what's happening now because international borders are closed, I think I have more advice for those people because there's a tendency to think that it's a one size fits all approach, but that's not it. Tasmania is radically different from Melbourne or Sydney.
Absolutely.
You need to wake up to what you're coming to. You need to do your homework and you need to ask questions because it is important that it is important that you tailor your expectations in order not to be disappointed or to be quick to judge this beautiful island before you have a chance to know it.
Tell me a bit about your current role in Launceston.
Currently, I work for the Northern Tasmania Development Corporation, where I manage the population program. It's actually a population growth strategy initiative, which is focused on growing the skilled worker cohort of the economy and the society. So what I do is to create and execute initiatives that improve workplace participation and social cohesion. So those are like the two key targets to get people together more and to get people more invested in living here for a longer time. And to get people to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so is that what you've been doing the whole time?
Yeah.
So how did you get into that job in the first place? Obviously you applied. But what was the process?
Yeah, it was a CV my CV just kept making the rounds. And then I was called for an interview. And I liked it. And I was given a chance to try it out for 15 hours a week.
Okay.
And I did that for a few months. And they were like, oh, we like what you're doing. Do you want to do it full time? I'm like, why not? I said, okay, yeah. And I went full time with it. Yeah. And I'm going on 3 years now.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great role.
Yeah, it is.
What are some of the things that you've enjoyed about Launceston?
Well, the first thing I really love about Launceston is the people. I've met by my work and because I'm a really social person, generally speaking, I've met quite a number of people and they're really nice and lovely people who, happy to welcome people and show you their world. They're always happy to answer questions, happy to introduce you, happy to have coffee, happy to, I'm coming from a mega city called Lagos, which has about 18 to 25 million people, depending on who is counting. 25 million people in one little small place. And you can't even see someone who, no matter how well-meaning they are, has the time to have coffee with you.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't find parking in front of my office for 2 years in Lagos.
Yeah, wow.
It's that hard. You need to wake up by 2 a.m. to get parking. It's that crazy. But, you come to a place like Launceston, I like the easygoing, atmosphere, the balance they have in their life, and the way they're able to, integrate new people into their community. And I feel like, I'm part of the Launceston fabric now. And when people ask me where I'm from, like when I go visiting other parts of Tassie and I'm asked where I'm from, I always say Launceston, and I see the look on their faces and I smile.
But have there been any challenges with adapting to life here?
No, really. There's been none. like I've said again and again, it's just like Nigeria.
Yeah.
There's really been no challenges. In fact, they've only been advantages.
Okay.
Like it's a safer place to be. It's it has a more responsive public service than Nigeria. It has a more balanced lifestyle. You can commute in 10 minutes to the office and back and things like that.
Yeah.
It's only advantages I see comparison to where I'm coming from or other places I've been. And, if there were to be, if I'm to mention any challenge, what it will be, Nigerian food is really expensive here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my main challenge. It's really super expensive.
Well, I guess some of the ingredients too.
No, they have to import it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes through a lot of middlemen.
Yeah. Because I know some of the ingredients are not so common.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I've seen okra around a bit more.
Yeah, okra.
I know it's a pretty big thing.
Okra is good, but we have so much more, like that we would want, and there's also the way it's processed.
Okay.
It's not just the ingredient, but how it's processed, and the people back in Nigeria know how to process it that way. Yeah. And even if I'm giving a raw, let's say I'm giving a catfish now, I don't know how to make it the way the Nigerian people make it. Yeah. I think the average Nigerian has a master's degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's we're very competitive because we have to be. We're 200 million of us.
Yeah.
And there's only so much resources to go around. And so most Nigerians here in Tasmania are doctors.
Yeah.
And
noticed that.
Or
nurses.
Yeah, or nurses or engineers, and I trained as a lawyer in Nigeria.
Okay.
So and I have like my CV is so huge.
Thank you for listening to another episode of 177 Nations of Tasmania. Don't forget you can also follow us on Spotify, Facebook and Twitter. Just look up 177 Nations of Tasmania. And thank you again for listening.